referendum is a unique decision. It's a decision that there is no turning back from usually. It's a decision that is binding, and this is a decision that has less of an ability to make checks and balances by other authorities of the government and to actually stop it, unlike any other political decisions. That's why we think that in that kind of context, a decision that is based on a lie, a decision that is based on the wrong fact, is a decision that is not legitimate. But worse than that, we think that this is something that includes a criminal element to it. We think that politicians that lie during referendum campaigns, meaning here we define going against facts. We're not talking about simply promising you some sort of vision of what they're going to do, but we're talking about lying on the amount of money that is received from the EU, like in the case of Britain, how much the NHS costs, what are the border agreements with France in the Calais jungle, what is exactly the terms of the negotiation between Greece and Germany. We're talking about facts here. If politicians make lies about factual things that have to go into the decision, whether we say yes or no to a referendum, we think they should be held accountable and there should be the ability for citizens to sue them. Now here we acknowledge the fact that not all sues would end up eventually with the politicians being at fault. We think the judges are capable of making the decision based on information that we can find out, based on research centers and so on, and we think that they have the ability to decide whether or not. But we think that for the ability to actually find out those lies and for the ability to deter in the future, this is something that we are willing to do. We're willing for it to be individual citizens, and we're willing for it to be groups of citizens. We're going to start to show you why we think there's a criminal element here. No, second of all, we're going to show why there is a fault in the politicians, not only on the people themselves, meaning that people could not make their own rational choice in a case of systematic lying, and we're going to show you why we think there will be more deterrence in the world after this motion. So, first of all, let's start with why we think that there is a specific criminal element. So, first of all, we say that there is a lot of incentives for politicians to actually go and lie without being caught. We say that this is something that in itself is fraudulent. We wouldn't accept even any kind of advertisement that gives you wrong information about the product that you are about to have. We think that this is a logical continuation simply in the political sphere, which is already problematic. Notice that here we don't even have to show that there was a problem with the results of the decision. So the decision might have even been a one that the majority of the people liked, but the fact that there is fraud is enough within itself to go and sue. And we say that that is a problem. Second, we say that there is the element of the criminal intention. Many times these clarification.
Would you also reverse the results of the referendum?
We say that this is something that politicians should decide. We think that if there are enough people to sue and actually show that there has been a lie, there might be room for reconsidering whether the decision was legitimate in its entirety. We think that this is actually a good case for knowing, but we don't say automatically that we would change results. We don't think that this is the way politics works. We think that it should represent what the people want. Okay, so there is the idea of the criminal intention. Many times politicians themselves, we say that they have much more access to information, meaning that they have the money, they have the resources, they have the teams telling them what is likely to happen, and they are in there, they are in the places where the political things are happening. So it's very likely for Tsipras to know what he's negotiating about, meaning that if there are lies that are being spread, this is due to a criminal intention, meaning they knew that they are lying and they continued on doing that in a systematic way. Sometimes they even hear criticism about it from the media or from other politicians, and yet they continue on repeating on and on and on. Therefore, there is some sort of criminal intention that we say is enough to have reparations because they decided to do something that is not by accident. Thirdly, we say that there is the element of the results, which is something that you should get compensation for. And here we say that sometimes the result is the political result, meaning that the turnout of the referendum is something that I didn't actually know would happen. I voted for no, but I never thought that I wouldn't get that money back. I voted no, but I never thought that the borders are the thing that actually exists or is controlled or not. So here we say that the result could be very risky and very terrible for the people themselves, because their lives could be ruined, the way they see the world, their country, because of that. And we say that this is a problem. But there is also a big problem of misusing the trust that politicians have. We say that the political system is built on representation. Now, obviously, you should have some sort of criticism, but you cannot completely think that everyone is lying to you. If that were the case, then we couldn't trust anyone to represent our interests. We say that there might be a change of interest, but there couldn't be the distrust to the facts presented themselves. So here the politicians go against their basic role of what they should do, and that is to mediate the reality to their voters and to show things as they are. The moment they don't do that, they actually go against their obligation to the people. And thirdly, we say that there is the idea of the public's image. Many citizens are being hurt by the fact that they made a decision based on a lie. Their faces are smeared in the media. They are being shown as a mockery to their friends because they did not even a mistake, because they honestly thought they were doing the right thing, but they were frauded. Therefore, they should demand compensations from the people that have caused them to make this kind of decision. Now, why do we think that we cannot only blame the public? Because we say that there are cases in which the ordinary Joe would believe a lie, and he has no ability to actually think critically. A, because sometimes the information is hidden, the information is complicated to access. People are not good at going through Excel sheets and so on. Sometimes there isn't a strong opposition, or an opposition that has so much money or has so much room in the media. The media also has to show what the politicians are saying when they have their own meetings and so on. So they cannot block completely the lies. And we say that if the ordinary person can make a mistake, this is something that even if he has some responsibility, the politicians also have responsibility. That means that they should be sued and should be held accountable for their wrongdoings. For those reasons, we call it a proposal.
Madam Chair, we from PEP are reasonable people, and we can see most of the speech we just heard. Often, yes, these are lies. Often they do influence results. Often there is intent to influence results. But what we don't hear a single sentence on is the counterfactual. What the situation would look like if their policy was implemented. We will argue in opening opposition that it will be significantly worse than the status quo. Here is an analogy. Relationships, especially emotional relationships between two human beings, are based on relations of mutual trust. That trust is often broken when people lie to one another. We still don't criminalize that because the practical implications of that would be significantly worse than what exists in the status quo, even though lying is bad. What do we do support? We definitely support multiple sources of information. We support independent fact-checking websites, similar to what we had on the BBC during the referendum campaign. We support claims such as lies openly government cares about being called out on in media sources. What we do not support is a single source of information or courts making a decision on this. Firstly, what is the issue with courts or any other bodies making the decision? Firstly, you can't get by the fact that courts or judicial systems themselves also may have biases. Note that the Supreme Court of the US is heavily biased based on partisan lines. But even if they claim the US is an extreme example, note that the judicial system in the UK also is significantly more liberal than the general population. Those are biases you simply cannot get by on. Secondly, many claims that are made are just unclear. They say that politicians blatantly lie. That's a false characterization. Most of them make claims that are somewhat ambiguous for the reason they want to be defendable. Because if you're presented with a claim you can't defend at all, you make yourself seem like an idiot on national television. Case in point, the most infamous claim of the Brexit campaign was that exiting the European Union will save £350 a week for the NHS. That amount was the gross amount of what's put in the EU budget. It's not the actual amount that would go to the NHS, but it's the initial amount of money that's invested. That's the defense that was put through by the Brexit campaign. Point is, a lot of these claims are simply ambiguous. Thirdly, we tell you on this, when claims are made, they are much more, when concrete claims are made, they're much more easier to call out. So, what are the practical implications of their policy? Well, plenty of politicians will simply not want to be sued. Why? Several reasons. Firstly, it is harmful for your reputation, even if you do not get convicted. Note how Donald Trump got sued over the workings of Trump University. Even though none of those trials or suits resulted in a conviction, his reputation was to a large extent damaged. Because what politicians mainly care about is being seen as respectable and trustful. Secondly, it is also harmful for a lot of backers. Financial institutions always settle out of court because they don't like trials and they don't like being dragged through the courts. Thirdly, a lot of resources are tied for these politicians at the moment when they get sued. So firstly, you not only spend a lot of money on the judicial process, but often you do not know how long will it last, how will it influence that campaign, etc. Fourthly, it just leads to a lot of money being spent. Now, before you think this is a point for OG, listen to what the implications of such a point are. What is far more likely to happen is that you have ambiguous and very often unclear pledges. So, when the Brexit campaign was able to claim they would spend £350 million a week more on the NHS if Brexit happens, that's a claim that can be called out on. A claim we will have much more money for the NHS is one that is much more difficult to call out. Now, what they want to claim on that is that but people live in bubbles anyways. Firstly, that's non-comparative because if a politician can't make a claim on Fox News, someone else, an analyst from the far right, will be able to make it. But to an extent that some voters try and get independent information, it's far more easier for them to see claims called out when there is a specific number offered by politicians. But secondly, what we tell you is that this is also likely, even when claims are inflated, what's likely to happen is the way in which they will be presented now are those that seem much worse. Plenty of people think that the number of immigrants that come to their countries are measured in millions. The actual amount of people that comes to the UK as immigrants is 200,000 people a year. That's less than 0.5% of the population. Say even if that claim is inflated to 400,000 people, 500,000 people, something you could call out, it's still a much smaller number than what people perceive it to be, especially people they care about, so people who already take in the claims they care about very much. The ultimate result of this is, how do then campaigns change? Aside from the fact that you have far less clear claims, you will also have much more pernicious, personalized campaigns. So rather than talking about 200,000 immigrants, you have an interview with someone who works at the docks in Dover, whose job was stolen by a Polish immigrant. Those are kinds of campaigns that are much more personalized, much more difficult to call out, and much more emotional, which means you're far less likely to get the kind of discourse they will presumably try and talk about in their second speech, which makes it overall worse. But more importantly, this also leads to a persecution complex. A lot of the extremists just feed on the fact that the entire political system is against them. We don't see why they don't necessarily think, when courts sue them or convict them, that it was an objective decision of the courts. For plenty of these right-wing politicians, Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump, was far more likely. Yeah, go for it, sorry.
Okay. Unlike any relationship in which you have a lie, the lie in politics is something that affects other people, meaning you have third-party damage.
Yeah, the same happens when you lie to your wife and you have kids. But that's not the point. The point is my whole speech, which shows the situation gets even worse if you implement your policy. So, a lot of politicians, think about Donald Trump, will just be able to claim they're even stronger anti-establishment claims. So it's not just the political elite, it's also the judicial system and the prosecution and the entire state attorney. Secondly, that just provides a great platform for them. When they have limited resources, but they're dragged to court, that's something the mainstream media loves to report. That's how Donald Trump gets all the free attention by claiming claiming that Mexicans are rapists. Thirdly, we tell you that they can refocus the debate on something that is far more useful for them. Rather than defending their racist claims for people like Nigel Farage, they can claim they're defending the right to free speech of people who are Eurosceptics and do not like the fact that 350 million quid is going to the EU. So overall what happens is that you shift the debate in a way that focuses much more attention on the very people they want to stop making the exact same claims. Possibly, even if they win the principle and they don't, the results of what they want to propose is far worse. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now please welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Here. Honorable panel, it's nice that the opening opposition decided to concede most of the case brought to you by Monica, because basically they are accepting that there is a legitimate claim here. They are accepting that there is a right to sue, that the people have a right to demand compensation for the wrong that has been done to them by these guys. They just conceded the entire principal case that exists in the debate, and they put their entire case only on will the ability to have, will the fact that we have a trial be a good thing or a bad thing. So we win on the principal case, but now let's go to the practical. Look, they come and give us this like weird analogy to a relationship, but it's not. It's not the same thing, although politicians a lot of times kind of screw the public over. Not the same thing. Why is that? Because we're saying when we're talking about the relationship between politicians and the public, we have a representative role here. Meaning we have a certain dependency. Meaning we have a particular role that's different, does not exist in any kind of relationship. That means that once the politician is actually lying and causing me to make decisions that are not in my best interest as an individual in a society, he's basically embezzling in my trust. He's basically going against the one thing that he was supposed to do in the first place. Coming and saying it's the same thing when you have kids and a husband lies to a wife is not the same thing. This logic also is not the same thing when you want to talk about third-party damage. Because let's be clear, if you want to talk about children in divorced families or something like that, you still have two loving parents who care for them. When we're talking about third-party damage in economic, in political systems, we're talking, giving the ability or making decisions about going to war, for an example, or about getting our country into economical crisis and our currency collapsing completely. You cannot compare the two of them to a child now having maybe two homes to sleep in. But moreover, this logic also stands for incitement and says, you know what, there may be some basic truth inside incitement, so we should not have this as a felony. We should not sue for that. We really want to hear why the opposition are willing to support this kind of claim. Now, second thing, they tell us you cannot trust the judicial system. They tell us that we have problems with judges. This is generic analysis that basically goes against the entire judicial system. This also tells us that you cannot trust the judges for any kind of a court case that involves politics, meaning deciding whether or not to authorize a protest, meaning deciding whether or not a particular party is legitimate or not. There may be two races that want to kick it out of the political sphere. If we cannot trust judges to make any of these decisions, then why do we need a judicial system? It simply does not make sense, or you need to have better justification why you think that they're so bad at their job. Last thing, they tell us that politicians are going to give, that the outcome is worse. Why is this? Because politicians are going to give vague information. Honorable panel, this is our case. We think this is better. Why is that? Because we say that numbers and facts
have power. They have a special power in convincing people, in making people believe in a certain scenario, in a certain reality, much more than some vague information. We are saying at the point at which politicians stop giving numbers and start giving vague information already alone, it's good for us, and we're happy for this to happen. Because you know what? When they come up and say we support the data being out there, we support newspapers, we support websites with the information, we say great, this is exactly the information you're going to have, the focus that you're going to have once the politicians stop shutting out this information. Because the thing that happens today, let's be clear, today when a politician, someone that I chose to represent me, someone I put my faith in, someone his job is to go through the information and make the best decision. When he goes up, or she, the politician, go up and give numbers and lie with the numbers, that's exactly when the public has no interest or has no incentive to go and look through these numbers and these databases, because already you have all the facts. You think you have all the facts because of these particular lies. So you're actually blocking the citizens' possibility to go and search for this information. And you all know the case of how we work 9 to 5, and the best case scenario, we want to spend some time to we don't have time to go through all the newspapers. That's what we hire. That's what we have you representing us and going through this information for us. So on the comparative, when the politician now gives vague information like they say will, what we think is going to happen? And when you have vague information, first and foremost, it's far less persuasive and far less convincing to the public. What does this mean? A, as a public, I might demand more accurate information. I might actually go out and search for the information before I make my decision. B, I'm not making my decision the same way, because now when I make my decision, I know that I do not have the correct facts, or I do not have the facts. So if someone won't care, they would this is also someone that would not sue in the first place. But people who do care, who do want to make the best decision for themselves, now can actually now know that they need to take a bigger effort in order to make this particular decision, and they're not being fraud a pound. Before I continue, yeah, sure, Siri.
Facts can be called out. Personalized story about a person that lost their job to an immigrant that is flooding the country and stealing their NHS, it's far more difficult to call out. How to get meaningful discourse on your side?
But this happens on both sides of the house. This happens anyway. This happens today. The problem is that today you have the emotional stories, but you also have backing it up with the numbers and with the facts. And that's the exact problem here. That is the fraud that we are talking about. We're saying we're very happy for this vacuum to open up without these lies. So what do we think the thing is? Look, ladies and gentlemen, we think that A, the problem scenario is at the moment that this motion passed, we're going to get two things. Either we get vague information and the public demanding for more, or at least the public knowing that it's not getting the right facts and having reporters and having the database working. Either we're saying politicians will just stop making false statements and stop lying because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they put on trial. We're saying the moment you have these trials, if you win them, it's amazing, because now you have an actual legitimate tool by the proper authority of the court saying that this is a decision that should not be respected because it was not an informed decision, meaning people have the power to change the results if there are enough people who think that this result is horrible. But even if we lose the case in court, we're saying it's still important to have the trial, because this means more and more people are now aware of the wrong process that has happened. Now people are aware that they need to demand more from their politicians, they need to go and search for more information. Now people learn their lesson for the next time, but you need to have coverage for this thing. You can't just have someone sitting at home and saying, oh, now maybe I should have Googled what is the EU. But to actually see people in prime time saying, okay, this is a lie, this will lie, this is how you coerce us, and here's what we should do next time to fix our world. We're so happy to propose.
Now please welcome the leader of the opposition. Here.
Boris Johnson is many things to many people, but he's not a stupid man. Lies in politics today don't just tell lies in the conventional sense of I'm tall and attractive, which would be a lie for me. Rather, they say statements that are ambiguous, that may even be misleading. but that are in some sense defensible. Take their canonical example, 350 million, that's what we send to Europe every week. That is the gross figure. We get about 200 million of that back in other services that the European Union provides to us through our rebate. Now, when you're quoting the amount of money that we send, should it be the gross figure or should it be the net figure? I can make an argument either way, and that is precisely the point. Because in a world of call-out culture, in a world where a John Oliver video gets 48 million views 15 minutes after it was released, in a world where an interview or a debate can take a politician and ask them, how the fuck can you say this when it is blatantly untrue, the lies politicians tell are clever. The lies they tell are ambiguous. The lies they tell are lies where they have an answer when someone asks you, how can you say this? And that is the problem in this debate. Because how can you hold someone responsible for quoting a gross figure, not a net figure? How is that as criminal as going out there and shooting someone or stealing from someone? That is deeply ambiguous, and I think it is wrong to suggest otherwise, especially in the context of a biased judicial system. We allow the judicial system to opine on things like murder and theft because you either took it or you didn't, or you either killed them or you didn't. But is quoting a gross figure a lie or not? They think so, but he might not. Secondly, they gave us a principal case, and they claim we didn't respond to it by conceding it. We conceded it, but we explained why it didn't matter, because it was subordinate to practicalities. There are lots of instances where someone in a situation of trust intentionally lies to another. For example, the context of a relationship. Nonetheless, we do not hold you criminally responsible for lies in that context, because it would make that relationship worse. They gave us a response to this. They said, well, there are third-party harms. One, there are third-party harms in the context of a relationship. Your spouse is a third party. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, that concedes the point. If their argument is, we do this because a third party is harmed, our claim is there are just more harm to the third party and to the democratic process as a whole on our side of the house. So in that response, they see things our way. Thirdly, we got a concrete practical argument from staff, which was politicians will not give numbers, therefore they will lose. A couple of things on this. Firstly, a politician always has a risk reward between giving definitive numbers, in which they might be called out, or going for dog whistle politics inference. It's the difference between we send 350 million to the EU and just a picture of a line of refugees, which is not a lie, but is dog whistle politics at its worst. Dog whistle politics probably does get you called out more. So when you think about this whistle reward, at the moment, more often than not, politicians go for the numbers. Now on their side of the house, incentive-wise, they're much more skewed towards dog whistle because they won't get sued for that, whereas they could potentially get sued for the numbers. And their response is implicitly, well, if you're telling the truth, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. As Siri told you, just getting sued, even if that suit turns out to be frivolous, it only lasts a couple of weeks, has huge impact on you because the media can now play that person got sued and people will not ask, did they actually get convicted? It still makes you look bad when you get sued for a criminal offence. It still makes your donors pull their money away because they don't want to be involved in a criminal trial, regardless of the fact the outcome might actually be good for them. But secondly, it's worth highlighting that the worst politicians will not actually be deterred from this. The worst offender, the Nigel Farages of this world, will love this because it enables them to change the debate from one about them being racist to them being persecuted by a government that does not understand the importance of free speech. Then they said, people will demand more from their politicians. Why? I think people already demand more from their politicians. I think the environment where people are not going to demand more from their politicians, where their politicians are afraid to provide it because of the threat of litigation. But finally, wanting to demand more of your politicians in an environment where you have a finite amount of time to make a referendum decision is not good enough, right? You won't have time to demand that more because the decision will have to happen on the 23rd of June, and at that point, the dog whistle politics of refugees will win out. So, how does this change the debate with regard to extremism? How does it change the debate more broadly? Starting with extremism. 3 facts. Firstly, as already illustrated, many of these claims are ambiguous. Secondly, the judicial system is not impartial. One only need to look at the partisan state of the judicial system in the United States or the systematic liberal bias of the judicial system in the UK to understand that. Because judges are appointed by politicians and so do share their biases. Because judges do tend to come from certain social circles. It's not a coincidence that in the UK, judges didn't really understand the working class concerns that 350 million figure represented. Thirdly, it's worth pointing out that very often people look at trials on the basis of sound bites, right? They don't read the whole decision. As a result, it's very easy for someone reading the paper to see one of these decisions as biased, regardless of whether or not it actually is. What does this mean? It means that as an extremist, you can now paint this as being a debate about the value of free speech and fair political process, rather than a debate about racism. How so? Firstly, you can stand up and say, I am not here to defend leaving the EU or not. I am here to defend a free and fair political debate that allows for free speech and the sharing of facts and does not allow a biased judicial system to persecute people. That appeals to more than just your core constituency. It doesn't enable you to be called out for racism, because now you're making a critique of a system that affects everyone, liberal or right-wing, and not just people from your particular sectarian bias, because you're trying to uphold the integrity of democracy. Secondly, it enables coalition building. Racists on the right of the United States have built a coalition with libertarians by appointing themselves as persecuted and standing for a political process that is fairer. Thirdly, it is more socially respectable. It's hard to say, I am listening to Nigel Farage and I support him, when Nigel Farage is standing up and saying, keep the immigrants out. It's much easier when he's standing up and saying, let's have a fair democratic process. The impact of this is you're still listening to Nigel Farage, you're going to his rallies, you're reading his media, and the result is over the longer term, he actually gains more support. They want to stop extremism and less informed decisions. In the long run, they help opening.
There are also commercials that are hard to determine whether the detergent is 90% effective in taking off the rust, and still we allow citizens to
And you
sue
know what?
because
I
it's
would not
possible.
allow those citizens to sue. There you go. Secondly, how this changes the broader political debate. The point is, politicians don't just want to avoid a conviction, they want to avoid going to trial. It's having a picture of a politician up there with a jury of 12 staring at them, with lawyers saying you are a criminal, irrespective of whether or not they actually get cleared, is terrible for your image, terrible for your donors, and wastes huge quantities of resources. That means that the politicians on all sides of the debate will not want to quote facts here. What does this mean? Firstly, as Siri explained, more dog whistle politics and less decisions actually based on numbers. What is the impact of this? It is easy to rebut a number. We saw it with a 350 million figure. It is hard to rebut a picture or image of refugees saying these people are coming to your country and they will tear up your culture. Because that is an inherently ambiguous claim. It just comes down to how you feel about what being British is. What makes you feel secure, whether that's diversity or having people who are the same. That's something you can't rebut. It's a debate that's much harder to bridge. The more the currency of the debate becomes emotion and dog whistle, and the less it becomes actual numbers that can be rebutted, the harder it is to bridge the political divide, the more polarised, the more angry, the more fearful people become. They get a worse politics, and they're failing to system they're failing to serve. Proud to stand in opposition.
Thank you very much for that speech. Thank you very much for the first half. And now, please welcome the Member of Government. Here you go.
It is not a matter of simply whether the detergent commercial lies to you and tells you that it creates bubbles, but it doesn't really. The thing is that the mandate was broken. A promise upon which a contract was based, and a promise upon which I outsourced a piece of my sovereignty on a person that represents me was broken, and they deserve to be able to be litigated. It's basically like estoppel in tort law. I get the right to sue a person based upon whose actions which I inform a behavior which can have a detrimental impact on my life, i.e. leaving the European Union. We're going to extend this debate by explaining to you specifically why politicians and people have a liability connection, explaining to you how this reinforces the trust in democracy, which is flailing in the modern world where we have people coming out of elections on the numbers in the low 30s, and lastly, for minorities in a far better shield of defending themselves against oppressive politicians, but before that, a crap country, but specifically on courts and on the idea that they are biased. Now, the general idea that opening opposition tries to pervade this debate is that courts are biased and are generally liberally based and skewed, much like debate judges. But what they fail to perceive is that, much like debate judges, you don't have one judge. You have a plenum. You have a lot, even on the Supreme Court of the United States, currently you have 8 people, rather you have 9. They're pretty well balanced. They're pretty well under the auspices of the law, the Constitution, and the media, and they have a check and balance system on them. And, like Michael said in his last speech, oftentimes you have a jury, which basically means that you can find 12 unbiased, impartial people from another country deciding on the facts that have no relevant impact on their lives, which means that they can have a far more balanced approach. Lastly, the general idea is that courts are fair because the majority of people perceive them as fair, because that's what allows for a legal system to survive in the first place. If we believe that courts were unfair, then that very uncomparative point also stands in the status quo, and every single judicial ruling could be called out as being a skewed on the liberal fence, which is something we don't see happening. Specifically, that is true, then the entire idea of political martyrdom and people claiming that they're defending free speech in the European Union doesn't really stand because the majority of people will not eat it up, right? But second point, this idea that politicians will have less clear claims, that Syria points out. Yes, that's great, less clear lies. It's better for you to have, even if it is a dog whistle politics, which we believe falls under the model created by opening government, you still get somewhat of a less clogged and fucked up discourse. Now why is that so? Now even the dog whistle that Michael tries to build up in his second speech, he had like an image of immigrants crossing the Suez Canal and claiming that it's Lamar, basically. It creates an environment which is conducive for people to manipulate and monopolize the way they think in order to create fraudulent behavior and fraudulent outcomes, to manipulate your trust in us as politicians to create an outcome which is beneficial solely for us. That conducive environment is tantamount to lying, and it's also liable under the auspices of law in the status quo. You should really study law more. But basically, the second idea is that you will simply be using human interest stories. Now, human interest stories are generally quite empathic and rally a lot of people, but human interest stories are only potent to a given extent if they can be backed by any relevant claim whatsoever. If they can be backed by a vague number, then obviously people believe that they are more trustworthy and then they back them up in the general sense of the idea. The notion that the comparative difference after we implement this model is just to still have a human interest story which has to be tailor-made to a specific voter, which means that the Tories cannot use a human interest story for any given group of the society because it would cut out a piece of their voting base, which necessarily lessens the amount of impact that their lives can have on the general population, but also you don't hear a number telling you that you send 350 million pounds every single week or month or something to the EU budget. It doesn't really matter if it's a gross or a net figure. What matters is the way you manipulate it and use it. Why? Specifically politicians have this idea that they can monopolize the discourse. Because people, and this is where I get to the liability part, because people have this general idea that politicians are an expression of ourselves, an expression of our morals, norms, and values. They are not only our representation, but they are our avatars in the political sense and in the political sphere. Now the problem with that is that I am more likely to listen to my local politician, to my local congressman, and to Boris Johnson than to listen to facts, than to listen to John Oliver, than to listen to other people, because people are generally status quo biased and etc. But the problem with that is that it builds up a trust that crowds out other sources of information. And on that end, the fact that they cannot get any more info, they are liable unto me. But basically, Madam Chair, the idea is following. I based my behavior based on what politicians told me, and I say, for instance, invested in an outcome of a given political setting which I was lied to. I have the right to be remunerated, I have the right to make day in court. They will not be shamed in and of themselves, and the mere fact that they're sued doesn't necessarily mean that their political careers are destroyed. If they win in court, they have a state-sanctioned piece of paper to shut up all the naysayers and to say that they were true and that they were right. For instance, if we sue Boris Johnson, Michael Gominagi tomorrow, and they won in court, there would be no more naysayers and no more mentioning of the 350 million quid going every month to the European Union. Basically, that mitigates the adverse effects on the political campaigns which we see from closing government. No idea why should care about that from the opening opposition. Go.
You want to criminalize images that emphasize how people feel without making any falsifiable claim. How much stronger do you think that might make the critiques of the system posed by Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders every single time they say people's ordinary concerns are being stifled by a liberal elite?
Great, thank you for that question. But basically, about two things. One, criminalization may have been a misfortune modeled by opening government, we probably should be talked about and secondly, But secondly, we're not criminalizing the image. We're criminalizing the use of the image which creates an environment which is conducive for you to alter your behavior in order for you to lose trust in general politics. And this is the second impact. If you have a clear, immediate, and unbiased and impartial mechanism for you to impose a check and a balance on a democratic system, you trust that system far more because you expect from the politicians not to be lying as much as they have been lying hitherto because there is a huge axe, there's like the sword of Damocles right around their neck. And that's the general idea. if I can use sports, which people are intrinsically tied to, because all of us have been to sports at some point or another, we all see legal shows on TV, which basically means that the politicians are no longer beyond reproach and can't be sued. And now, why this specifically caters to the needs of those that are disenfranchised in the status quo is because also people like minorities, people that are disenfranchised, people like immigrants, they reform their behavior based on they're directly impacted by the lies of, say, the Leave campaign, can now take them to court and vet them efficiently. And that's precisely why this motion is fair, Madam Chair. Because your day in court is fair, balanced, and impartial in all ways. Because if it weren't, we wouldn't be having courts hitherto in the democratic system that we live in currently. For all of these reasons, more than proud to stand for proposition.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now please welcome the member of opposition. Here.
Our extension, in our case, would mostly be based on a little bit more of framing, which we didn't hear that much on the first side of the table. Because we believe that things, how people vote, how the narratives create inside the society, and how the people guide themselves to vote on referendums and elections are extremely important in this situation. And it's not like just politicians lying about some facts, that are the only thing that affects people and the way that they're voting. And for that, a few points of rebuttal. So what we hear from the side of what we never hear from the side of the government is why it's specifically important to call these politicians out, to send them to courts only on referendums, and why are referendums so fundamentally important in this situation? Because as we know, it's not as Jonga says, like we gave them, we had an agreement with them, we gave them our voices to speak before us, and it's not the same as we had a contract. Because those people already knew that politicians are all liars. They already knew that they shouldn't actually believe everything they say. They already know that they should calculate about the things that politicians are saying. It's not like, oh, there's a politician, he reflects me. Let's believe everything that that politician says. It's not like people are stupid and everyone will be like, okay, I'll believe every fact that politician has said. Also, the politicians are already held accountable for the things that they're lying, saying, and etc. Not only referendums, also in election campaigns, and every day when they stand up in front of the public and speak, they are already held accountable because they have also other politicians that could call them out and point out the things that they're lying. We have media, we have people, protesters, everything. We have all of those things that could point out also why those politicians are lying. Also, why it's not criminal and why you shouldn't take them to court. Because if you already knew that these politicians have a questionable morale, because we all believe that they do, we should probably take them to court every time they lie. It's not just on referendums. They never explained us why this should be only on referendums. And we believe that that's why their cases don't stand. So what we want to tell you is that, as I already mentioned, we believe that the narrative that is created inside the society is extremely important because it probably already exists. And as I said, how do people vote? They don't it's not like they have never heard about the question that's asked in the referendum. It's probably that's a fundamental question inside the society, that's why it's in the referendum. It's probably that question affects their lives every day. It affects them in reality. It affects them on their jobs, in school, inside their families, their, wages, whatever. Those people know how that referendum question affects them in their real life. That's why people already have like pre-directed decisions in some kind of way. It's not like they have pre-directed decisions, and they just want to see what each politician is saying. Are they going in their direction or what not? It's not like they would decide only on the fact that has been lied by the politicians, and it's like it's like just the interpretation of the things that the politicians are saying from their knowledge that they had before about their lives, about how those things affect their lives. Also, what I always said is like politicians always lie. If we already knew that the politicians lie, we would know so far that we shouldn't trust them on every and each thing that they are saying. We believe that some people probably would believe on each thing and everything they are saying, and some people would vote that way. But most of the people, majority of the people, wouldn't vote that way because they already know that. Okay. No, thank you. Later. Okay. Next thing. We also believe that the politicians already take repercussions for things that they do wrongly. For example, they not only take repercussions like from the next election when people wouldn't vote for them if they knew that they are like liars or whatnot. We believe that the politicians also take repercussions in a way that inside their party establishment, whatnot. Like we have like Nigel Farage leaving the UKIP party because he was promoted in the media like someone who voted UK out of the EU just because he lied. So we believe that those politicians have repercussions and are also called out not only by people not voting but also with other parties, other politicians, because it's not like the referendum would happen in 7 days if people don't know what the hell is happening. We have like other politicians, we have campaigns, it's like a 3-month campaign. We have like David Cameron who could have like in 3 months maybe point out what's the true fact. It's not like the fact has like written in God's book or whatnot. It's the fact that you can find anywhere like in bureaucracy of the European Union or whatever. So we believe that we have those measures that can stop politicians from lying like this. First,
the fact that there might be some responsibility on also other bodies doesn't mean that there isn't justice on our side and we should sue because we're creating a better world in which we have more truth and less lies.
Okay, we believe yes, you can have justice, but we don't see how you ever explain to us why we should specifically take them to court for things they lied at referendums, because they lie all the time and we already know that, and we don't take them to court because they lie to us all the time every day in front of the media. Okay, next thing. Also, why sometimes it's good for having like politicians lying or misleading us a little bit. Sometimes like it's good because you should sometimes keep in times of crisis. You need to keep citizens in peace. Sometimes you need to secure a country. You need to secure citizens inside your country. It's not, and you need to be like a stable and reasonable politician and not having all the fuss about a certain question inside the society. So we believe that sometimes it is important to actually lie a little bit to the people just because you want the best for them. Okay, so what we actually explain to you is like a little bit of framing of how people are voting. It's not like they believe everything the politicians are saying. A little bit about the narrative of the campaigns inside the society, about politicians always lying and us knowing that, and about politicians already being held accountable and taking repercussions. Thank you.
understand.
Ladies and gentlemen, what Andrea and me want to do today is basically to defend 17 million people that voted for Boris Johnson in the previous election. Moreover, we want to protect and make it unable to happen for this thing happen again. And additionally, we want to protect all of the people of Scotland that voted that wanted to remain and to stay within the EU. So, why is this so? How do we want to sum up this debate? We briefly want to cover the point of the liability of the actions because of the first position basically conceded to this idea. We'll just add on something to why this constitutes additional liability in these specific cases of the referendum, which we think has to be analyzed more. But immediately after that, I want to go into weighing consequences of the actions, which we think that it was a crux of this debate. And in the final sum up point, I will briefly deal with it and effectively deal with the second proposition. Firstly, what the first government brought to you here, the liability is constituted by the third-party harm that is created by the scenario of the referendums and the scale that it has on, and the magnitude that it has as a consequence of the magnitude of the effects that it has on the general populace. We added two things here. Andrea explained that this gives additional liability coming just from the pure scale of the events of the number of people that are influenced here, especially those who are not maybe directly tracking specific interest groups, which is in case of the United Kingdom, basically Scotland, which has, for example, independent different authority, which was influenced by the authorities of London, or basically this is maybe best explained by the pun made on the Pornhub with Boris Johnson saying, blood from UK being having sex with 50 million people. Sometimes. Just the scale of the third-party harm coming out of it constitutes additional liability that allows any kind of persecution of the people that are lying with this scenario, specifically those who are lying. Secondly, we think that additional level of liability comes of the irreversibility of certain decisions made by the referendums, aka leaving the UK, no matter how many people sign the petition, immediately next day for another referendum, when people are aware now that they will lie, no thank you, didn't give a possibility for these people to get their justice done right. Finally, on this issue, what we concluded on both sides of the House, we believe that, and what Andrea explained the most, is basically when you people give a mandate to someone to execute on their will, if that mandate is given and the will of the people is given based on the lies, we think that mandate becomes illegitimate, ergo these people who actually made these proclamations that made this mandate illegitimate have the responsibility to be brought to the court and for these people to be compensated. Coming to you, Michael, just in a minute. So, what Siri and Michael brought you and Andrea responded to. Firstly, how we should weigh is whether we will have more or less third-party harm, and about courts whether they have biases or not, and how would these processes eventually potentially look like. Firstly, we think that what we are doing with our plan is we explained that we are putting additional check and balances system between the people and the authority. Additional check and balances system creates additional level of deterrence, Mr. Speaker. This additional level of deterrence creates scenario in which people are less likely to lie, which we are perfectly fine with. We think that we have scenario where people are less likely to lie. We have more of the democracy being fulfilled, more legitimate mandates being done by governments in the name of the people. No, thank you. Which creates a scenario which we have more of this legitimate will being fulfilled. Secondly, on this issue, how do courts have biases? We agree, some courts have biases. But this doesn't necessarily mean that all courts will be in favor of one decision or the other. We think that these biases are polarized, which we are fine with it in the terms of this great scenario in which maybe in many cases people will be compensated for the wrongdoing that they are being done. Secondly, when they simply just say most of these scenarios will look like because politicians have so much money that they will just throw the money to this problem in order to solve it. We are fine with that. If they throw a lot of money to this problem, it means that people are compensated, it means that our plan works, it means that we had a preparation for the damage done to these people in that sense. Now,
best case scenario for you guys, people shift to false claims that are unfalsifiable, but still nonetheless have dog whistle implications, and you get the rise of extremists who are now able to broaden out their critique to everyone who loves freedom of speech. Comparatively, how the fuck do you guys win that?
Yeah, okay, this is where we answer how the narrative changes. Basically, if you want to talk about minorities, I think the minorities get most benefits out of our plan. Because basically, the minorities and immigrants were the most influenced by these decisions. Basically, now are there, like, this is where they would be protected by the popular will of the people. Because without the meddling with the will of the people, the ones who would be protected in a specific case of Brexit would be those who, because it was won on the false premises, if they stay, minorities would be protected. Now they wouldn't have to be expelled out of the country, where we have now a situation that many of them are in doubt how their future will look like. Secondly, how the narrative changes, and this is, we don't believe as well, and we concede to this idea that maybe people will never be extremely precise, but how will the dialogue look like is much different, because what we have is that we have state campaign that's basically said, we are not, when the Leave campaign said that we are giving 350 million every week or month to you, the state campaign said it's not that much money, we get that in return, and we cannot bring it in NHS. Nobody hears that when they hear 350 million, 350 million. When they don't have ability to go into that preciseness, we think countering these acts when the state campaigns say, it's not that much money, and they say, no, it's a lot of money, more chances the rightful decision has to be coming because it's not based on the false preciseness of the entire thing. The ambiguity in this specific scenario works in the name of, in the benefit of people, Mr. Speaker.
And to make informed decisions. So that means that we cannot blame the politicians, and specifically, again, they have not explained why criminally and why referendums. Because again, note that it's not only that you represent people in referendums. Decision makers are also like being elected on national levels and elections and whatnot. That means it's highly important even then for them not to lie, because then again you can make the decision. They can make the decision for you to go to war and what's not, and economic sanctions, austerity, and all those terrible things. So we believe that even in that case, they have to prove to us why even in those cases we should prosecute them. Okay, next thing is, they say that scale and this groups is why we actually have to specifically bring them to court. We believe that's not necessarily true. Again, the Brexit vote has shown us that we have 48, 52, right, percentage of people who voted for this. So it means that people were actually they knew what was going on, they had their stances, and they voted for what they wanted. Yeah. We believe that's their right. We believe that politicians just using them to get, just using the facts to present them in a way that they will actually empower their supporters to actually say, this is what, this kind of money is actually right, and I want to go over there. No, thank you. Second thing is, when you tell us that we'll actually have more trust, you are actually promoting the right of the people to contest politicians in court. You have to be aware of the graveness of that situation. That does not mean more trust, because people will just use it to contest politicians more. That means that they will always find a reason, the opposition will always find a reason to contest someone. They will always find something because it is not right for them. Remember that it's, again, politically flawed democracy, because you have all these interest groups, lobbies and whatnot. You always have someone contesting them. Now remember, when you contest someone all the time in the media, the first opposition will say that you will have like a different debate in society. Secondly, you will have like a less of a functioning system, because now you have to like check everything that everyone is saying. And I'm not going like full scale here. I'm going just even on the minimum comparative that happens. It means that it's a deterrent for you to actually talk about the facts, to actually solve problems, and to have trust of the people. Okay, next thing is, no thank you. Now, of course we believe that people need some compensation if they're smeared in the media and whatnot. However, we also explain to you that politicians are most likely already held accountable. We believe that they can lead the parties. I mean, look at David Cameron, look at Farage, look at Boris Johnson even dropping out of the election. That is a concrete repercussion from the referendum campaign. That means that politicians are held accountable. You have re-elections, you have mechanisms to actually stop this kind of thing and to actually recall leaders that have wronged you and whatnot. We also believe that even if you say that the referendum is specific because it's large scale, because it's like direct authority and whatnot, we still believe that there are mechanisms to prevent this. We still believe that there are like protests, that opposition media, John Oliver and whatnot. We believe that there are like recall possibilities, petitions and whatnot. But the thing why that isn't happening is not like in this debate, meaning that it's just the point that you have like mechanisms to stop this thing. Yes.
People that face trial for incitement or hate speech also say that they are being persecuted for freedom of speech. It doesn't mean that we're not justified in suing and that we would not get a better world of vague statements that are more easier to criticize than facts with halo of truth.
Yeah, we still do not believe that's the case. We believe that we have proven to you that you can hold them accountable, that they can have repercussions, that people can have compensation, and that the first opposition showed you that you actually have a worse, like in practice, you have like worse outcomes in your case. Okay, so even like Danis already told you that there are some things that can actually become like good even if you're lying. Like the main issue here is how well you do the campaign. Like I already said in my opening statement, basically you can actually like look at, I think a referendum in Ireland a few years back on the gay marriage question. We believe that you had like a really good campaign on the LGBTIAQ lobbyists, meaning that they actually managed to suppress the lies of the Catholics and whatnot, and they actually came to the right outcome. We believe that in a case where you have an insufficient government in the Brexit case, that is just your fault for not campaigning well enough and not calling out well enough these kind of things. Okay, so why does the opposition then technically win this case? We believe that on the principle level, we have shown to you and minimized the third party harm, that you have a responsibility to not vote for the people who lie to you, that you know those things and that you know how you vote. Secondly, we believe that you can get compensated, that you can get justice in what they say. And thirdly, we believe that we have shown to you the practical damage of bringing politicians to court on the referendums, and what it actually means not just for the debate, but for the political institutions in themselves and the policy in itself. So vote for a bench. Thank you very much.